Chapter 5, Madame Flores. On the 29th of Floreal, year 6 of Toulon, Bonaparte stood on the bridge of the Océan, the vessel to which he had entrusted his fortunes, and gazed, as long as he could see it, at the handkerchief Josephine was waving. He still loved this woman, no longer with the passion of young love, but with all the tenderness inspired by gratified desires and flattered affection. He loved her as the incarnation of grace and elegance, his ideal of femininity, the first woman who had shown him tenderness, the first who had really given herself to him. He had arranged with her that as soon as he had completed the conquest of Egypt, of this result he was perfectly confident, she should join him there. A frigate was to be dispatched for the journey. Josephine may have made the compact in all sincerity, but very soon the thought of such a long journey to unknown regions disturbed and alarmed her. In Paris, she gradually became absorbed once more by old habits, old friends, the pleasures of society, and above all, by the lovers who had followed her from Milan. Her indiscretions at last roused Bonaparte's suspicions. He began to show his uneasiness, even during the voyage from Toulon to Malta, and hence to Alexandria. Old doubts rose again in his mind. He wished to make sure. He questioned his friends, and they answered him. On various occasions he took aside those in whom he had most confidence, and who were least likely to withhold the truth from him, and insisted on hearing from them what he had been said of his wife in Italy. To all that had happened before his marriage with Josephine he professed indifference. When on the 23rd of Prairial, year 4, he wrote to her from Milan, "Everything about you was but an added charm in my eyes, even the recollection of your errors and of the sorrowful scene that took place a fortnight before our marriage." He gave the keynote of his own character and of his comprehension of love. His claims upon the heart, mind, and senses of the woman he loved he conceived of as dating only from the day when she pledged herself to him, accepted his love, and seemed to return it. But from that day forth she belonged to him absolutely, and woe betide her should she deceive him. No sooner were Bonaparte's eyes open, no sooner was the delusion he had cherished at an end, than the idea of a divorce suggested itself to him. He considered the bond broken between his wife and himself. Had it been possible to preserve his ignorance, he would no doubt have been as faithful to her in Egypt as he had been in Italy. But now he may well have felt that there was no obligation to continence. Why? He may have argued, should he not take advantage of any distractions that might relieve the tedium that weighed upon the invading army. Such distractions, but a few months ago, he would have looked upon as treason to a beloved and faithful mistress. Now they seem but the natural weakness of a man of 29. He seemed to have felt an attraction of curiosity towards the women of the East, as had many of his officers. Some half dozen were brought before him, but their appearance, and notably their obesity, filled him with disgust, and they were hastily dismissed. He was already remarkable for the extraordinary fastidiousness of his senses, in especial for his susceptibility to smells, and the irritable delicacy of his nervous organization. Greater attractions were to be found at the Tivoli Egyptian. This was a pleasure garden modeled on the Parisian Tivoli. The enterprise of an émigré, formerly a member of the Garde du Corps, and a fellow student with Bonaparte at Brienne, who had obtained leave to follow the army. As at Paris, there was a club, all manner of games, wooden horses, swings, jugglers, all men. The spectators ate ices as they watched the performers, or listened to the military bands. All this would have been charming had it not lacked its chief essential, the feminine element of its French counterpart. But there were very few European women in Egypt, to the great disgust of the army of occupation. Numbers of the officers resigning themselves to the inevitable married native wives. The only European women who frequented the Tivoli had followed the army. The most stringent orders had been given before the embarkation that all officers' wives were to remain at the brigade depots. Though Those who had reached Cairo, therefore, had all got there by means of some stratagem, the most common device being the donning of male dress. Thus disguised, they had escaped the vigilance of sentries and had made the voyage concealed in the hold of one or others of the troop ships. They were naturally, for the most part, women of free and audacious manners, ready for adventure, bold, and even martial in an emergency, like General Verdier's wife, who handled a gun like any soldier. The flower of the flock was a little fair-haired lady with a brilliant complexion and exquisite teeth. She would have been attractive anywhere in Egypt. She was adorable. Her name was Marguerite Pauline Bellio. While apprenticed to a milliner at Carcassonne, she had succeeded in marrying her employer's nephew, a handsome young lieutenant of the 22nd Chasseurs called Frederic. In the middle of the honeymoon came the order for the bridegroom to embark. The bride put on a chasseur's uniform and sailed in the same ship with her husband. At Cairo, she resumed her feminine habit. She held little communication with the other officers, and the young couple were cited as models of wedded bliss. On Premier 20th, year 7, December 1st, 1799, a fete was held at Esbekir, the chief feature of which was the launching of a balloon, a phenomenon intended to astonish the natives of Cairo, who were, however, so little impressed that they scarcely turned their heads to look at it. Bonaparte's two young aides-de-camp, Merlin and Eugène de Beauharnais, pointed out Madame Forest with such vehement praises of her beauty that Bonaparte, in his turn, noticed her and began to make inquiries about her. In the evening, he met her again at the Tivoli Egyptienne, exchanged glances with her, approached her, paid her all manner of compliments, and spent half the evening at her side. The attack thus opened, auxiliaries at once came forward to help in the siege. Prompted either by virtue or prudence, the little woman held out for some time. Protestations, declarations, letters, costly presents were necessary. At last she surrendered. On the 17th of December, Fourier received orders to embark, alone this time, on the Chasseur, Captain Laurent, to make for the coast of Italy and thence to carry dispatches to the Directory. At Paris he was to see Joseph and Lucien Bonaparte, and to return promptly to Damietta. He returned rather sooner than he was expected. The very day of Fourier's departure, Napoleon gave a dinner party to the little wife and several other French ladies. Madame Fourier sat beside him, and he did the honors with great gallantry. All of a sudden he threw over a decanter of ice water as if by accident, and on the pretext of repairing the damage done to his neighbor's dress, carried her off to his own room. Appearances were almost saved, it was remarked. Almost indeed, but the prolonged absence of Madame Forbes and the general soon made evident the real nature of the episode. The most charitable could hardly feel any further doubt on the subject when a house was hastily furnished close to the general's place of Elfie Bay for Madame Forest's reception. She was scarcely installed when Forest suddenly returned. The chasseur, which had set sail on December 28th, had been captured the very next day by an English cruiser, the Lion. The English, perfectly well informed of all that was going on at the French headquarters, mischievously released Forest and set him back on parole on his pledging himself not to serve against them throughout the rest of the campaign. Marmont vainly endeavored to retain Forest at Alexandria. He arrived at Cairo in a fury of wrath and gave his wife every reason to regret her escapade. Madame Forest demanded a divorce to escape his violence, and this was granted in the presence of a commissary of the army. On his return from the Syrian expedition, the husband was again ordered to return to France, and an urgent order to give him every facility on his journey was addressed to the naval commissary. After the divorce, Madame Forest, who had resumed her native name of Belle-Ile, but who was better known throughout the army as formerly at Carcassonne by the pretty sobriquet Belle-Ile, appeared openly as the general's mistress. Richly dressed and living in great luxury, she did the honors of the palace to the few French ladies with the army and entertained the generals at dinner parties. She was constantly be seen on the public promenades, either driving by Bonaparte's side in an open carriage, the aide-de-camp on duty riding beside Eugène de Beauharnais, among others, or riding an Arab horse that had been trained for her. in the general's uniform, a three-cornered hat on her head. "There's the general," as the soldiers would cry. The more cultured called her Cleopatra. Round her neck she always wore a long chain, to which was attached her lover's miniature. The liaison, thus flaunted in the eye of the day, caused very little scandal. From 92 onwards, it was usual to find among the staff of a Republican general young women in male attire who sometimes performed the duties of aides-de-camp, like Demoiselle de Ferring, sometimes other functions like Ile de Green, de Montmorency, Edith St. Elm, and others. A suit of man's clothes was an essential item in the wardrobe of all the emancipated women of those days, and the custom of carrying a mistress or even a wife to the seat of war became so usual among the generals that from time to time of the Peninsular Campaign to the end of the Empire, scarcely one among them was unaccompanied. We may instance Masson in 1810, 1811. Eugene at last took exception to the public drives. He retained his post as aide-de-camp to his stepfather, however, and was exempted from duty on these occasions. Bonaparte became so infatuated with Belle-Éliane that he discussed with her the possibility of repudiating Josephine, and even proposed to marry her, the ex-milliner of Carcassonne, in the event of her bearing him a child. "But the little idiot doesn't know how to have one," he pettishly remarked, to which Belle-Éliane retorted when the speech was repeated to her, "It certainly wasn't her fault. She remained at Cairo during the Syrian expedition. Bonaparte wrote her the most affectionate letters. When, after the Battle of Aboukir, the general embarked for France on the Muir-Rhone, he left orders that the ci-devant Madame Forest should rejoin him as soon as possible in the first vessel that could be equipped. Kleber, however, had his own views on the subject. Succeeding Bonaparte in the command of the army, he no doubt considered Belle-Éliane one of the prerequisites of the commander-in-chief, and put one obstacle after another in the way of her departure. At last, thanks to Desjardins, Madame Forest was allowed to embark with Junot and a few scientific men who had accompanied the expedition, Riga, Lalemant, and Corinth as the younger, on a neutral vessel, the America. The America, however, fell into the hands of the English. Belle-Éliane remained a captive for a time. She was finally released and sent under safe conduct to France. When she arrived, however, it was too late. A complete reconciliation had taken place between Josephine and Bonaparte, and the events of Brumaire and the 18th had made her lover the first magistrate of the Republic, the man to whom all looked for an example of dignity of life and austerity of morals. It has been said that he forbade Belle-Éliane to enter Paris. Be this as it may, she appeared openly at the Francais and other theaters. The consul, however, always refused to see her. On the other hand, he granted every request she made for money. On March 11th, 1811, he made her grant of 60,000 francs from the theatrical fund, in addition to large sums already received. He bought a country house for her near Paris and married her to a returned emigre, Monsieur Henri de Ronchou, a sometime artillery officer. The marriage took place in 1800 at Belleville. The husband, who was of a good Auvergnat family, received a wedding gift from the vice-consulship of Santander, whence he was promoted in 1810 to Gothenburg. In spite of her new husband's appointments, Madame de Ronchou seems to have spent most of her time in Paris. She was there in 1811 and again in 1813. In 1814, she became a persona grata in fashionable circles and was a frequent visitor at the houses of Baron Girard, the Comtesse de Soucy, and the Baron Breyer. She also made an excursion into literature, and Delaunay published a novel in 2 volumes by her called Lord Wentworth. This, however, concerns us less than the novel she herself had lived. She painted too, and not without a certain charm, to judge from a pretty portrait in which she has represented herself plucking the petals from a daisy. A strange fancy, for if she had known something of passionately, she had undoubtedly concluded with not at all. Her saucy, vivacious head is charming, though it smacks somewhat of the milliner. The hair is cut short and curls all over like a child's. The figure is delicate and seductive, the arms remarkably beautiful. The whole has a something fresh, gay, and attractive, a blooming grace that atones for the lack of distinction. About 1816, Madame de Ronchou, having finally separated from her husband, sold her furniture, which was of considerable value, and sailed for Brazil with a certain Sir Jean-Auguste Bellart, a retired officer of the guard. There were rumors in Paris that she had realized her entire fortune and that she proposed to open up communications with St. Helena and effect the escape of the emperor. Nothing was further from her thoughts as a fact. She had taken a strong aversion to her former lover and professed the most rigid legitimist principles when Madame de Brettes repeated the rumor in her memoirs with many admiring comments. Madame de Ronchou protested it might have gotten into her bad odor with the police who kept her under surveillance as a former mistress of Bonaparte's and who had her every movement carefully watched when she returned with Billard in 1825.